This morning we have a guest speaker, Shawn Nevins. Shawn, as he put it, fell onto a spiritual path in 1990 as a college student, and then he had an awakening experience in 1999. And you can read all about this in his book, Subtraction. You know, I'll see it here and here. Subtraction, the Simple Math of Enlightenment. And let me tell you, it's a really fine book, and don't let the title scare you off. It's not full of a lot of equations. It's really just about the overall process of a spiritual path. Is not about acquiring things, but about subtracting things from your life. So, and it's it's very rich in characters and life experiences and so forth. So today, Shawn is a spiritual teacher in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he hosts a website, spiritualteachers.org. So all run together. That's simple to remember, spiritualteachers.org. And it's a curated collection of spiritual teachers. He's got interviews and so forth, books, films, and thoughts, podcasts, and so forth. It's a very rich website. Check it out for yourself. I know Shawn because in 2020 he interviewed me for this website, and you can find that probably on his website, and you can find that interview on our website, the Center for Sacred Sciences. So you want to check that one out. But there's also a deeper karmic connection, because it turns out that Shawn's awakening was sparked by reading a transcript of a talk called The Induction by Franklin Merrill Wolff, who was my teacher. So we're like family, like second cousins in this family, the spiritual family that we didn't know about until we met each other and so forth. You can listen to that talk and read that transcript yourself. Maybe it'll do something for you. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Shawn.
So when Jude and I were discussing my coming here, I don't know how this came to be. I'm going to blame Jude for this. She said something like, how about a talk on enlightenment? I said, okay, fine. Now, in retrospect, I think she set me up talking about enlightenment, because the more I worked on this talk, the more I thought, what in the world am I supposed to say about enlightenment? That said, I'll do my best to not fall on my sword as I'm trying to describe or give you a feel for something which is, for hundreds or thousands of years, people have tried to communicate this. And I want to approach this as this first slide indicates, with words and also with some images that I think are evocative of this incredibly difficult to describe state. And I also want to speak to all of you, not just to your reason and your thoughts and your thinking, but to your intuition as well, because that is the most direct way to try to communicate something like this. This first slide, the image that you see there, dates back to the 1600s from the Tantric tradition. And the name of this is pure consciousness. So here's someone 400 something years ago trying to communicate a state that I feel like they had a feeling for. And the best that they could come up with is this field of a color. And perhaps if a person looked at that field and was open to what was being communicated, they might have some resonance with this image or some feel for what was trying to be communicated. This particular image reminds me of a poem. And basically, this talk is going to be a mix of images and words. I might read a few poems here and there. And then there's a little bit of, let's call them suggestions that I have that might be an aid to discovering an awakening for yourself, or deepening an awakening, perhaps, that you've already had a glimpse of or a feel for. So the poem that goes with this, this is actually by what I would call my primary teacher, Richard Rose, who I spent some time with, and that's described in the book that Joel mentioned. And this poem is called The Dawn Breaks. The dawn breaks because another day and night have died. But the sky was there through all. The butterfly floats a moment, and then his dalliance is only an eternal picture. The breast flows with milk and is dry forever. And the lullaby of life and the ear that hears it weaken and cease. Nothing is happening and nothing is done. The sun rises in glory, and the lover stretches his shoulders with ambition. The sunset is forever, and the lover drinks of beauty, and beauty drinks of the lover. And life loses its pride in death. Nothing is happening. Nothing is done. The I and the urge are beauty and life. The owner is disenfranchised. The holder lets go of his grasp, and everything becomes his domain. God is in his thought, and his thought lives only in his God. Nothing is judged. Nothing is known. Nothing is meaningful. Everything is perfect. And those words and an image perhaps passes a feel from myself, from someone hundreds of years ago, perhaps from you as well, that rises up to meet those words and the moment. And this, I think, is the best that we can do to try to communicate with one another. This idea of what is enlightenment. This is an image by a photographer, Phaedra Levy, and she and I collaborated on a book called Hydroglyphics, right? A play on the words, and that she took many different photographs of water. And when I saw these photographs, I just had this impulse of, I've got to find some words to go with these. Because when I looked at these photos, they drew me in, almost like a feeling of falling into or being pulled into something. And that feeling of being pulled in also brought a feeling of letting go. Oh, could I merge with this in some way? Could I be with this? Can I find words that will go with this? And so we put together a little book called Hydroglyphics of my poems and her photographs, and there's copies of that on the back table as well. And I just have 2 poems that I wanted to read. This is called Inside a Waterfall. If I could see you without the drape and fall of preconceptions, without my drop of self splattering its contents in every corner, if I could see you without pleading, without needing the universe to answer with something other than another question or suggestion of eternity, if I could see you in the obvious, painful, and beautiful transience of phases, in the roaring silence that sings praises, if I could see you, if that happened inside a waterfall, it might look like this. And really it's another, right? It's an invitation. And I really feel like these moments captured in images, some, right? They're invitations for us to truly be, to relax, and to see one another. And just one more poem and then I'll move on. Because I know that poetry isn't really everybody's cup of tea. This is called Dancing Ship. A photon's long journey from the sun is equal parts effort and grace, which is not that hard to imagine for a creature both here and not here, particle and wave. I imagine the meeting of these qualities like the scalloped turns of pure reflection in this photo, and like the curve of meaning as these words form in your mind. I imagine the bond of effort and grace, beingness and non-beingness, looks and sounds like this holy moment creeping up the back of your spine, unrolling before your vision, inhabiting the intersection of turn within turn. When we cross paths like this on our long journey from the sun, there's no more imagining. This image is often referred to as the weeping Buddha. And I wanted to give you just what I sometimes call the 4-minute history of me, which Joel already alluded to a bit. When I was 23 years old, thought that I was headed towards the top of the world. I was starting graduate school, and I was going to be a professor of agriculture and do research and have a little house out in the country with a porch and picket fence. And my wife would be there with me, and I had this moment, an image of a moment where she would hand me a glass of lemonade, and we would for all time be sitting as the evening sun was going down. That was what I pictured as my life, my goal. And so I went off to graduate school, and within probably 2 or 3 months, a professor was calling me into his office, wanting to know why I was falling asleep in his class, and the girl that I thought was going to be my eternal partner completely rejected me, and all of my image seemed to be falling apart. And I found myself walking across campus one evening, literally in a trench coat, mind you, pulled tight, head down. What am I going to do with my life? And I happened to stop at a bulletin board, and there was a poster for a talk called What is Enlightenment? And I only a couple of weeks ago realized the irony of this talk and the title of that talk. And I thought to myself, I've heard a little bit about Zen. I've heard of this thing called enlightenment. Maybe there's an answer there. I'm going to go to this talk. And so I did. It was a couple of weeks later. I'm in this room filled with people. I sit in the back row, and this older gentleman gets up, comes to the front of the room, and proceeds to give a talk, which is questions. Question after question after question. And I wanted to give you just a tiny feel for what that was like to sit there. And he began with, what do you know for sure? Does a man own a house, or the house own him? What is life? Is it a collection of memories? What fraction of a day do we remember, and how accurately? Is life a dream, an illusion, or an opportunity? What is a life well lived? Is this life just one of many? Are we ever evolving? If so, what is it that is evolving? A soul, a spirit, an individual self? If so, what is the point? What is the ultimate aim of this evolution? Is there an end? If so, what happens after we reach the end? What were we before we were born? And it went on like that for an hour. And at the end of that talk, I didn't have any answers. I had no clue what enlightenment was, but I felt like this gentleman, Richard Rose, was speaking directly to me, and that he had something very important that he was trying to communicate, and that was the beginning of my spiritual search. And that search went on for 9 or so years until, as Joel mentioned, I ran across those words by Franklin Merrill Wolff. So what is enlightenment? Enlightenment is the satisfaction of your deepest longing. And I realize that definition is describing what might be considered an after effect of enlightenment. But I think that this definition keys you into something that I consider incredibly important, which is the connection to your deepest longing, which every moment of every day is trying to speak to you and asking you to be present, to relax a little, to pay attention, to listen. And this definition avoids all of the preconceptions that our minds are filled with from reading books about enlightenment and hearing people talk about enlightenment. This avoids all of that, which, as many teachers will say, those preconceptions are barriers to actually realizing and noticing what is going on. Who am I? The image by an artist named Y.Z. Kami called Blue Dome. Another image that I feel like it is trying to point to some truth about us, the universe, what is. What is your deepest longing? What would it be to have an answer to that, a certainty about what you are most uncertain of? That's enlightenment. And it may manifest very differently for different people. But what matters ultimately is for you. Does it answer that deepest longing? And that deepest longing is something that, for myself, I noticed it changed over time. When I began my spiritual search at 23, my deepest longing was to not be miserable. That was it. And I was hoping that this thing called enlightenment would answer that longing. And over time, as I began to study myself, observe myself, I began to wonder about other things, like, well, what happens after death? Are these thoughts all that exist of me? And then my question changed over time. So the refinement of that question, I think, is important, because as you refine it, you connect with a deeper and deeper longing within yourself. And that longing will bring you home. Yeah, but what is enlightenment? Come on. Give the mind some more words. All right, a few more words. Here are 3 quotes that I feel like give a sense. The first is by Meister Eckhart. The eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me. My eye and God's eye are one eye, one seeing, one knowing, one love. And I find this quote is very inspiring. Who wouldn't want that, right? God and I are one. One seeing, one knowing, one love. If you feel into that, what would it be to be one? What would it require of us to be one? It's not, we think of it as, oh, God and I, we're one together. No, not together, one. So it implies there is a letting go, there is a dissolution of self in order to be real, to be God. It's not Shawn and God standing next to each other. It's something other than that. The next quote, Franklin Merrill Wolff. I am that which is never an object before consciousness. So if you know my story, you know that this quote was quite the pivotal force, let's say, that in some way that I can't explain allowed the hold, my grasp on myself to loosen. I am that which is never an object before consciousness. And if you explored your interior landscape with this thought in mind, you would be practicing subtraction, backing away from what is less true, what is never an object before consciousness. It's a koan, really, that urges you to explore it for yourself in real time in meditation, in your daily life. And the last quote, which in its feeling or in its attitude, it's almost 180 degrees from the Meister Eckhart quote. This is Wang Po. Men are afraid to forget their minds, fearing to fall through the void with nothing to stay their fall. They do not know that the void is not really void, but the realm of the real Dharma. And I really love this quote because it speaks to the fear that I felt on many occasions as I came close to something larger than myself or deeper than myself, and feeling that I would be swallowed by it. Feeling that this is death. Enlightenment is death. I don't want anything to do with that. Turn away from that. And that one piece, they do not know that the void, death, is not really void. And that's speaking to a part of ourselves that two things. One, may have a feel for there is an answer there, and that what may feel like death, there is an answer there, and I want to know more than anything else that answer. I want the answer to my deepest longing. And also a little bit of trust or faith that these wise people who have gone before us are not misleading us, and they're trying to point a way. So an image as well on the slide. This is from the book Conquest of Illusion. And this is one of those images, again, that could sort of pull you into it. And it says a couple of things, speaks in a couple of ways to me. It is a torus, donut shape, which sort of both pulls you into the center, but there's also, in the way that it's drawn, there's a feeling or visual feeling of an emanation. So pulling in and an emanation. And enlightenment, our source, may appear or may give us both of those feelings, that we're both being drawn in and there is an emanation, a source, a creative fountain from which our self is arising. And both of those ideas are captured in this image. Of course, the problem with any image is that, well, it's sitting in space, right? The torus, of course, it's sitting in space because what we can conceive of are two things, but in reality, there is only the torus. It is all space. All that is that image. So why don't we know all of this already? Why aren't we enlightened? The one great barrier, as I see it, which has been referred to as the penny that blots out the sun. That's a little phrase by a Zen teacher named Alfred Pouyan. This is Shakespeare, I think, points right to it. But man, proud man, dressed in a little brief authority, most ignorant of what he's most assured, his glassy essence. Like an angry ape, plays such fantastic tricks before high heaven as make the angels weep. Our little brief authority. I know. I am certain. But no, ignorant of what he is most assured. So that quote also speaks to what in Zen teachings is referred to as the great doubt. Imagine what I'm most certain of, I'm actually most uncertain of. And there is a depth to our unknowing that is worth exploring. Because in order to explore that, we also have to relax or let go to some degree, to be open to doubt. Five suggestions that I found helpful. I wanted to try to provide some suggestions or some aid. The image here is by Bronwyn Lace. It's called God's Fingers. And I believe it's an actual sculpture, I suppose that you would call it, which I would love to see in person, but we have the image. All right, suggestion one. Enlightenment entails the discovery of what is real rather than the attainment of qualities. I think that we can get ourselves hung up a lot of times with, I should be this, I should be acting this way, I should be a kind person, I should be peaceful, my words should be kind, I shouldn't harm other people, because all of those things are qualities, aren't they, of someone who would be enlightened? Surely they must have these high qualities, these saintly qualities. If you can, as my book Subtraction points to, suggests, it's actually the backing away from qualities that may lead us to what is real. Letting go of these preconceptions. There's a tremendous, I would say the best way to put it, right? If you're working towards adding qualities to a self that we actually don't know the reality of that self, we're sort of putting flowers on what may be a straw person. So let's not do that. Let's not weight ourselves down with preconceptions and beliefs. So that's one suggestion that I have that I think can make the path a little easier or a little more fruitful. The view is not the viewer. This was one of Richard Rose's little sayings that caused me a lot of consternation. It ties directly with Franklin Merrill Wolf's idea of I am that which is never an object before consciousness. Anything that I can see is not me. And as I approached my meditation from that guideline, it really caused a lot of unknowing. And in that unknowing, I really was able to feel for something other than what is right in front of me. The image is Ernst Mach. It's called Self-Portrait. It's a little hard to understand what's going on there, but Mach is attempting to draw himself from his own perspective. If you've ever explored the work of Douglas Harding, you'll see this a lot. Douglas Harding makes reference to this. You can see Mach has drawn his feet and his legs and his hands, and it even has his hand with a pen in it as he's trying to draw himself. And you see at the top of the image, that's his eyebrow, right? He's trying to literally draw all that he can see from the first person perspective. And what's so intriguing is, well, his head, this back here, is just an empty space or a clear space in which all of these things that he can see are arising. So it ties in with the view. His feet, hands, etc., is not the viewer. So something back behind, unseen, is what we are. I promise you that this is the most complicated slide on here. It doesn't get any more complicated than this. The most direct path that I know of is retroversing the projected ray by backing away from untruth. And I know that's a mouthful, right? The image on there is an attempt to illustrate. In the center of that image, there's a silhouette of a person's head, and they're looking out at objects. A tree, another person, a little animal. But behind that person, there is some emanation from source, let's call it. And that's represented by the arrows at the far right of that image. An energy, a projection, something that manifests into all of this, all of us. And we, in turn, look out upon a world and we project upon that world. So the path is one of retroversing that projected ray, turning away from my projection and attempting to feel back to a source, to be pulled towards it, to fall backwards into it. And that is aided by the idea of backing away from untruth, subtraction. I can see the little things in my life which are obvious lies when I look out on the world and I see some person walking down the street and I say in my mind, oh, they're like this, they're like that. All projection. And then in my interior landscape, I do the same thing with myself. Oh, I'm like this, I'm like that. I'm a nice person. Projection. I can turn away from all of that noise. And that as well may, in my quiet mind, in my awareness, there may be a moment of being aware of my awareness, aware of this space, and realizing that that too is a thing that I can see and feel, and it is not me. My awareness itself may be emanating from elsewhere. And the little quote, I'll just read that little piece from Ren Lewis, which it may be hard to see. John Ren Lewis had a awakening experience that came about from being poisoned, and he woke up in the hospital in a transformed state. And this is very evocative of, imagine waking up, and he says, my impression is that my personal consciousness was actually snuffed out. He died. And then recreated by a kind of focusing down from the infinite eternity of that radiant, dark, pure consciousness. Moreover, that wonderful eternal life of everywhere was still there, right behind my eyes, or more accurately, at the back of my head, continually recreating my whole personal body, mind, consciousness, all that I know myself to be, afresh, instant by instant, now and now and now. Two more suggestions. This I've already alluded to. Finding your natural koan will fuel your search. Connecting with your deepest longing, which is most likely not what is enlightenment or I want to know the truth. These things can sound good, but they don't really, in the gut, in your heart, they don't really bring longing and passion. So what is it that does? And the reason I put this particular image on here, it's called Sunrise on the Saucony. I forget the artist. Is that for some people, this image and the hazy light, the idyllic look, the cliffs, the sailboats, brings up a nostalgic feeling, a longing in them. And for other people, this image does nothing. It's like, okay, some boats on some water, right? And that's the difference amongst us all. And how do I find that which brings up that longing? It's unique to each of us. And that is part of how you make the path your own. Cultivating self-honesty. The joke this always reminds me of is some study that says 80% of drivers out on the road are actually average drivers. But if you ask people, you'll find that 90% of the people who drive consider themselves above average drivers. And that kind of sums up our view of ourselves. It can be extremely difficult to cultivate self-honesty and an objective view of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and how successful have I been. And a great antidote or aid in that is what you have right here, a group of people who you can have conversations with, you can be honest with. You could ask someone for their honest opinion and they'll give it to you. That's incredibly valuable as an aid to cultivating self-honesty. And then the other suggestion is what this image is by Rembrandt, I believe. It's called something like The Philosopher in Meditation. And to me, it evokes what I used to call my end-of-day honesty. So I'm lying in my bed and I'm thinking about my day, and I'm there alone, and it's just me in the universe. And what do I really know? And I always found those late evenings just would bring about a certain relaxation of my image that I was trying to project or hold, and let me honestly evaluate myself and reconnect with that longing, that uncertainty, the unknowing that is such a powerful guide. Okay, so wrapping up in closing. I really invite you to find the pauses in your life. And by pauses, I mean those moments between one thought and the next, between one dream and the next, one desire and the next, this continual flow of stuff that we're being almost assaulted with in life. And in those pauses, connecting with that deepest longing, because that deepest longing is essentially a prayer. And that prayer can be answered. And that answer arises through some combination of being with that uncertainty and that longing, and being completely and totally honest in that moment. So last image, and I'll read one more poem, and then we'll have some time for Q&A if there's any questions. This image is out of the book Hieroglyphics, but the poem I'm going to read is not mine. This is by Marie Howe. It's called The Singularity. And if you get a chance to hear her read it, I also find her reading pretty evocative. The singularity. Do you sometimes want to wake up to the singularity we once were? So compact, nobody needed a bed or food or money. Nobody hiding in the school bathroom or home alone, pulling open the drawer where the pills are kept. For every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. Remember? There was no nature, no them, no test to determine if the elephant grieves her calf or if the coral reef feels pain. trashed oceans don't speak English or Farsi or French. Would that we could wake up to what we were when we were ocean. And before that, to when sky was earth, and animal was energy, and rock was liquid, and stars were space, and space was not. Not at all. Nothing. Before we came to believe humans were so important. Before this awful loneliness. Can molecules recall it? What once was before anything happened? No I, no we, no one, no verb, no noun. Only a tiny, tiny dot brimming with is, 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 is. All, everything, home. So we have time for questions. If you got any questions.
So, wow. That poem was wow. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your presentation. One thing I was struck by, and maybe you want to speak to it or there's nothing to say, but making the path your own. I was struck by you saying that. Is there anything else that you want to elaborate about that? Because I'm going to walk home thinking about that, making the path my own.
Yeah.
That's really it.
Well, two things. Two things I would say. One is that if anyone has something that I want to walk home thinking about that. I want to remember that. That's to me one of the great challenges of the spiritual search is the moment I walk out the door, the assault begins for my mind and control of my mind. So how do we remember? How do we remember those moments when something seems so important? And finding a way to remember, I think it's extremely important. Of course, that ties back into my idea, or the thing I said about pauses, allowing space for pauses to arise in our life. Yeah, just the importance of that. And I do that to this day. And frankly, I kind of forgot about the importance in my own life of just taking just 5 minutes. And I sit on the couch and I look out the patio door and do nothing. Do nothing.
Wait a minute, there's not the picket fence and lemonade?
That's a great question. I'm glad that you mentioned that because connection to longing, in my own way at 23 years old, I was trying to connect to a longing for something. But the only words and the only life experience I had to find the answer was what others had done or what I had read about, which was, well, you get a nice job and you find a partner and you get a house. But what I was really searching for was that moment of, oh,
You said the word isness.
yeah. That's why, but I had no words for that, and I didn't even have and like an experiential, bodily felt sense for anything other than the machine, right? In this meat suit, as I've heard people call it. That's
Me too.
meat suit, right? This physicality that we walk around the world in. That's
Been
all
there.
I knew. Yeah, that's all I knew. I guess most people start with that. I'm just here in a body, and I got to preserve it and try to find a little peace along the way.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Appreciate it.
Microphone. What depresses me, and I want to get over that, I don't know how, is the unkindness of this world and the problems that people, not just people, make to each other by being unkind and mean. And you see, the problem doesn't have to be there. It's a problem that's created. And I find it so depressing because I would like to get over it and say, fear not, but I feel so sorry for so many people. How do I get over that? It doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to be that way to each other. And the problems would be solved so easy by talking and giving and empathy. And why is that so lacking? So how how do you cope with that?
Yeah. Well, from my perspective, you certainly are setting yourself up for a very difficult time if you decide that if you take on that weight of the world. It sounds a lot like you are feeling like you yourself should have some way to fix all of this.
Yeah, that's true.
And
It's true.
it would
Because I
be,
see it's so unnecessary.
yeah.
So what do I do?
Well, I would really encourage you to look into that that feeling. Like, where is that feeling of need? Like it's you. Where is that sense of responsibility coming from? Because that is you are doomed to fail. And and the sooner that you can find what it is that's driving you towards that. And I have no idea your life experience, how you were raised, past lives, how far do you want to take? Like what is it that drives us down certain paths?
It was like that way when I was a child. Where
That
does
way
it
when you
come
was a
from?
child. Yeah. Yeah. So there could be some value into seeing if you can find your first sense of that feeling of responsibility. And as a child, like we don't have the tools necessarily we feel this something is wrong, and it may be that the only tool that you had at the time was I must do something about this. I must fix this. Because we don't have the life experience to know any other way, and maybe you have, that experience has been burned into you as a way of reacting, as a way
Could
of
be.
trying to solve this unsolvable issue.
that could be.
I mean, that's the desire for. It's interesting that you mentioned kindness, since our other question also brought up
Yeah.
kindness. The root of that desire isn't necessarily doomed to failure.
Oh,
Remember that again. I go back to that first poem that I read about nothing is happening, nothing is done, everything is perfect. So there is a longing and a hunger in ourselves to experience that perfection
yeah.
and that letting go and that relaxation. And as a child, maybe the only feeling words you had for that was kindness. And you've been locked in this way of feeling like the world must be a certain way in order for it to be perfect. And if you may be able to examine that belief or that assumption and relax from that, and that may open you to a different sense of what is kindness.
Yeah. Thank you. I will work on that. That is a good answer. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for asking. I think we may have come to the point of ending. Thank you.